The HOA president stormed through my ranch gate in a red blazer, her face flushed as she pointed at the sheriff's deputy and demanded that I be arrested for trespassing. I stood beside the fence she claimed belonged to the subdivision, calm enough to notice the deputy studying my deed instead of reaching for handcuffs. She thought my silence meant fear. What she did not know was that the man she wanted removed from the land had spent 30 years reading law from the bench. Her name was Marissa Cole, and she had arrived with a violation packet thick enough to look official from a distance. Behind her, 2 HOA board members stood near a white utility vehicle, while a contractor waited beside a skid steer loaded with fence posts. They had not come merely to argue about a boundary. They intended to take control of the strip of land before the afternoon was over. The deputy examined the certified deed, then compared its parcel number with the number printed on Marissa's complaint. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. The 2 numbers were not the same. Marissa continued pressing him, waving a subdivision map and insisting that the narrow road beside my pasture had always been community property. Her confidence seemed to grow each time she spoke, but the paperwork in her hand carried no county seal, no recording stamp, and no legal description tying it to my ranch. I kept my hands visible and answered only what the deputy asked. Years in a courtroom had taught me that anger created noise, while documents created a record. I also knew that the deed was only the first layer. Inside my truck was an older county plat, a survey completed when I purchased the property, and a photograph of a boundary marker the HOA's contractor had tried to bury that morning. The deputy finally stepped away from Marissa and walked toward the fence. He studied the fresh tire tracks, the disturbed soil, and the new posts stacked on my side of the gate. Then he noticed something partially exposed beneath the dirt. It was a metal survey cap bearing the same parcel number printed on my deed. Marissa had called the sheriff expecting to watch me leave in handcuffs. Instead, the first physical evidence found at the scene was pointing directly beneath her contractor's equipment. I had bought the ranch 11 years earlier, after retiring from the county bench. For 3 decades, I had listened to people argue over contracts, access rights, damaged property, and boundaries they had never bothered to verify. Retirement was supposed to take me away from those disputes. I wanted quiet mornings, enough pasture for a small cattle herd, and a place where my grandchildren could visit without hearing traffic through the windows. The property covered 86 acres and had been recorded as a separate agricultural parcel long before the neighboring subdivision existed. My deed described every turn of the boundary in precise measurements. The survey completed during the purchase confirmed those measurements, and several metal markers remained visible along the eastern pasture. The narrow road beside that pasture was never part of the subdivision. It had once served an old farmhouse that no longer stood. A limited easement remained in the county records, but nothing in the documents transferred ownership of the land beneath it. For years, that distinction had not mattered. Emergency vehicles occasionally used the route during wildfire season, and I had never objected. The conflict began after the final phase of Red Creek Estates was completed against my eastern fence. The developer advertised wide roads, landscaped entrances, and a second emergency exit. That exit looked convenient on the sales map, but the pavement ended at my property line. The HOA inherited the problem when the developer transferred control to the residents. Marissa Cole became president during the HOA's first election. She was 42, sharp, organized, and determined to show the neighborhood that she could solve problems the developer had left behind. Within 2 months, she began referring to my ranch road as the subdivision's emergency access route. Soon afterward, she started calling it community property. At first, I treated the claims as careless wording. Then the HOA sent me a notice, accusing me of blocking access by keeping my gate locked. I answered with a copy of the deed and asked the board to identify the recorded document giving it ownership or unrestricted use. No one provided one. That was when I understood the disagreement was no longer about confusion. Someone had decided that repeating a claim often enough could make it true. Before sunrise the following Monday, I found a laminated enforcement notice bolted to my gate. It announced that the HOA would exercise its access rights within 72 hours and remove any obstruction at my expense. I photographed the notice, saved the envelope it had arrived in, and checked the county recording number printed at the bottom. The number belonged to a drainage agreement from another subdivision. The HOA was not merely mistaken. It was preparing to enter my land using a document that did not support its claim. The 72-hour deadline expired on Thursday morning. At 7:14, the first security alert reached my phone. A white utility truck had stopped outside the eastern gate. Behind it came a flatbed carrying a skid steer, rolls of wire fencing, treated wooden posts, and several tons of crushed gravel. The contractor who had waited beside Marissa during the confrontation stepped out first. 2 workers followed him and began unloading tools before anyone attempted to contact me. I watched the camera feed from my kitchen and saved a copy to a separate drive. The gate carried 3 visible signs identifying the ranch as private property. The laminated HOA notice remained bolted beside them, but it did not convert a demand into legal authority. Marissa arrived 6 minutes later in a red jacket and dark slacks. She carried a clipboard and walked the length of the fence while pointing toward the pasture. The contractor measured 12 feet inward from the existing line, marked the soil with orange paint, and placed a row of stakes through the grass. Marissa photographed each stake as though she were documenting land the HOA already owned. I called the sheriff's non-emergency number and reported that a contractor appeared ready to enter private property. I also contacted my attorney and the survey company that had handled the ranch purchase. Before either could arrive, one of the workers took a battery-powered saw from the truck. The camera recorded him cutting through the chain on the secondary gate. The chain fell into the dirt. The workers pulled the gate open, drove the skid steer into my pasture, and parked directly over the old ranch road. They never checked whether livestock were inside the enclosure. 14 cattle were grazing beyond the rise, and nothing prevented them from wandering toward the open gate except distance and luck. I moved the herd into the western field before approaching the work area. I did not touch the equipment, stand in front of the machinery, or interfere with the workers. I photographed the broken chain, the open gate, the tire tracks, and every person present. Then I placed a written notice on the contractor's truck stating that permission to enter had never been granted. Marissa answered by filing the HOA's first formal violation against me. The notice claimed that my locked gate obstructed a community emergency route and created a safety hazard for Red Creek Estates. It imposed an immediate $500 fine, followed by $100 for every day the gate remained closed. It also threatened to place a lien against the ranch if the balance was not paid within 30 days. The document looked polished, but its legal description contained the same incorrect parcel number found in her earlier complaint. It identified a stormwater tract nearly 2 miles away. The mistake should have stopped the project. Instead, Marissa signed the notice and directed the workers to continue. The skid steer scraped away grass and topsoil from a strip roughly 12 feet wide. It pushed the material into piles beside the pasture and exposed several lengths of old compacted roadbed. The crew then spread gravel across the surface, widening the route beyond the area described in any recorded easement I had seen. By noon, the damage extended nearly 200 feet along the fence. The contractor removed 6 original fence posts and replaced them with new posts farther inside my property. Each relocation reduced the grazing area and created the appearance that the ranch boundary had always followed the new line. It was not a surveying error. The orange marks showed that the displacement had been planned before the first post was removed. Marissa remained on site throughout the work. She inspected the alignment, compared it with a subdivision sales map, and photographed the new fence from several angles. Every time the contractor paused, she reviewed the clipboard and pointed farther down the pasture. Her behavior mattered because the HOA's insurance carrier could later argue that an independent contractor had acted without the board's knowledge. The video eliminated that possibility. Marissa had not merely approved the project from an office. She supervised it in person. The sheriff's deputy arrived shortly after 1 o'clock. By then, the new gravel lane reached almost halfway to the county road. Marissa approached him before I could and handed him a folder containing the violation notice, the subdivision map, and photographs of my locked gate. She described the situation as an emergency access dispute and accused me of interfering with a road maintained for the benefit of the neighborhood. She also claimed that I had crossed onto HOA property to photograph the workers. That accusation was the foundation of her attempt to have me arrested. The deputy asked both sides for ownership records. I provided my certified deed and explained that the surveyor was on the way. Marissa produced no deed conveying the strip to the HOA. Instead, she relied on the developer's promotional map and a copy of the limited easement with its final page missing. The deputy declined to decide the boundary at the roadside. He instructed the contractor to stop removing fencing until ownership could be verified. Marissa responded by insisting that stopping the project would endanger residents and expose the sheriff's office to liability. The contractor shut down the skid steer, but only after another truck had dumped a fresh load of gravel beyond the disputed gate. The pause lasted less than 3 hours. After the deputy left, the crew returned with a different vehicle and resumed work from the subdivision side. Rather than moving more posts, they installed temporary barriers around the gravel lane and attached signs labeling it an HOA emergency route. Marissa then sent a neighborhood-wide email announcing that the board had secured access despite resistance from an adjoining landowner. The email did more than insult me. It created a written record showing that the HOA intended to convert a limited emergency easement into regular control of the road. It also invited residents to report any attempt to close the gate. That evening, 2 vehicles from the subdivision used the unfinished lane as a shortcut. One drove across the fresh gravel and turned around inside my pasture. The second stopped long enough for its driver to photograph my house. I preserved both recordings and added them to the timeline. The next morning, the HOA escalated again. A certified letter from its attorney demanded that I surrender all keys and access codes for the ranch gate. It accused me of obstructing the HOA's property rights and warned that the board would seek an injunction, attorney fees, and additional penalties if I interfered with construction. Attached to the letter was the same incomplete easement. The missing page contained the limitations that determined who could use the route and under what circumstances. I did not respond immediately. I sent the entire packet to my attorney, along with the camera footage and photographs of the relocated fence. Then I returned to the damaged pasture to measure the gravel strip and document the exposed soil before rain could alter it. Near the center of the new lane, one section of gravel appeared thinner than the rest. A narrow metal edge projected through the dirt beside a fresh tire track. I brushed away the loose soil without moving the object. The top of a survey monument emerged beneath the surface. Its stamped number matched my deed, and the contractor's orange line passed 12 feet beyond it. The crew had tried to create a new boundary, but its own machinery had uncovered the marker, proving where the real one stood. I left the survey monument exactly where I found it. Moving it, cleaning it aggressively, or trying to expose the entire marker could have given the HOA an excuse to question the condition of the scene. Instead, I placed 2 measuring rods beside it, photographed the location from 4 directions, recorded a continuous video from the ranch house to the marker, and marked the coordinates on my phone. Then I called the surveyor. Daniel Mercer had completed the boundary survey when I purchased the ranch 11 years earlier. He remembered the eastern line because the old farm road crossed it at an unusual angle. When I sent him the photographs, he did not offer an opinion based on the images alone. He asked me to preserve the area and promised to compare the monument number with his archived field notes. That restraint was one reason I trusted him. By mid-morning, I had organized the evidence into 5 folders. The first contained every notice and letter from the HOA. The second held photographs of the gate, fence, gravel lane, and damaged pasture. The third contained the original camera files, not compressed copies sent through email. The fourth documented costs, including the broken chain, replacement fencing, soil restoration, lost grazing area, and survey fees. The fifth contained the public records I had already collected. The timeline revealed a pattern. Marissa first called the road community property before the HOA had reviewed the county record. She then issued a violation using the wrong parcel number. After receiving my deed, she did not pause the project. She supervised the contractor while he moved the fence 12 feet into the ranch. Finally, she accused me of trespassing on the same land her crew had entered that morning. Each event answered one question and created another. The mistakes might have begun as negligence, but when had the board learned that its claim was unsupported? More importantly, why had Marissa continued after receiving documents that contradicted her position? I requested copies of the contractor's permit, site plan, work order, and proof of insurance. The contractor sent only a one-page authorization signed by Marissa. It described the work as maintenance of an existing HOA access road. There was no survey attached. There was no engineering plan. There was no county approval. The authorization also stated that the HOA had confirmed ownership before work began. That sentence shifted responsibility away from the contractor and directly toward the board. I searched the county permit database using the number printed on the HOA notice. No result appeared. I tried the contractor's name, the subdivision address, the road name, and the parcel number. The database showed permits for landscaping, drainage repairs, and a clubhouse renovation, but nothing authorizing road expansion or fence relocation. The following morning, a clerk in the county development office confirmed that the number was not a pending application. It had never been issued. That discovery mattered, but it was not yet the decisive one. A missing permit could stop construction and create penalties, but it did not automatically settle ownership. For that, I needed the deed, the plat, the easement, and the survey to agree. Daniel arrived shortly after 9 with 2 assistants, a robotic total station, GPS receivers, old field books, and certified copies of the recorded plat. Marissa appeared at the subdivision entrance within 20 minutes. She remained outside my fence in another bright red jacket, watching the crew set equipment along the county road. I gave Daniel access to the ranch and then stepped back. He began with control points far from the disputed lane. His team located 2 older monuments on the north and south ends of the property before measuring toward the exposed cap. That method prevented anyone from claiming the survey had been built around the marker I had found. The first northern monument matched the recorded coordinates. The southern monument did as well. When the equipment calculated the eastern boundary between them, the line crossed directly through the exposed survey cap. It did not follow the fence Marissa's contractor had installed. The new fence stood between 11 feet 8 inches and 12 feet 3 inches inside my property. Daniel placed temporary stakes along the measured line, but refused to issue a final conclusion until he completed his calculations and reviewed the deed descriptions. His caution frustrated Marissa. It reassured me. While the survey continued, my attorney obtained minutes from 3 HOA board meetings. The earliest referred to the ranch road as a possible emergency exit. A later meeting described it as an existing HOA-controlled route. No recorded document appeared between those 2 meetings to explain the change. The third set of minutes contained a more serious problem. One board member had asked whether the HOA owned the road. Marissa responded that the developer's map showed it as an access route and that formal verification could be handled after the gate was opened. That single sentence established sequence. The board had authorized entry before confirming its rights. An email attached to the meeting records made the situation worse. 10 days before the contractor entered my ranch, the HOA's property manager had warned Marissa that the county plat did not appear to show ownership by the association. The manager recommended ordering a title report before construction. Marissa forwarded the message to 2 board members and wrote that waiting for a title review would delay the emergency access project. The response did not prove every element of intentional misconduct, but it eliminated the idea that the board had acted in complete ignorance. Marissa knew there was a title problem and chose speed over verification. That afternoon, my attorney and I reviewed the recorded easement page by page. The first page identified the ranch parcel and described a route along the old farm road. The second allowed access for emergency response, utility inspection, and temporary evacuation when the subdivision's main entrance became unusable. The third prohibited permanent widening, relocation of fences, regular residential traffic, and any transfer of ownership. The copy Marissa had given the deputy ended at the bottom of page 2. The missing third page was not an appendix or an outdated attachment. It contained every limitation that prevented the HOA from doing exactly what it had done. There was still one detail that bothered me. The final page bore a handwritten reference to a supplemental agreement. If that agreement had expanded the easement later, the HOA might argue that its incomplete copy was only a clerical mistake. I asked the county recorder for every document connected to the easement number. The supplemental agreement had been filed 7 years earlier, when the subdivision developer requested permission to use the route during construction. It granted temporary access to utility trucks for 6 months. The permission expired on a specific date and stated that no continuing residential or commercial right would be created. The developer had used the ranch road lawfully for a limited period. The HOA had mistaken that temporary permission for permanent control. By the end of the week, Daniel delivered the preliminary survey. His measurements matched the original deed, the county plat, the 3 surviving monuments, and the cap beneath the gravel lane. He also documented the exact area disturbed by the contractor. The new gravel covered more than 2,300 square feet of my property. 6 fence posts had been removed. The gate chain had been cut. The route had been widened beyond the easement corridor. The survey answered where the boundary stood. The camera footage showed who crossed it. The permit search showed the work had not been approved. The meeting records showed the HOA had acted before verifying ownership, but the most important question remained unanswered. What did the missing page do to Marissa's trespass accusation? My attorney read the limitation clause again, then placed the certified easement beside the sheriff's incident report. The report stated that Marissa claimed exclusive HOA control over the disputed strip. The recorded document stated that title remained with the ranch owner and that the HOA possessed no general right of entry. He advised me not to contact Marissa and not to publish the evidence to the residents. Instead, he prepared 3 evidence packets. 1 went to county code enforcement, 1 went to the sheriff's office. The 3rd went to the HOA's insurance carrier, with a preservation notice covering emails, meeting records, contractor communications, and every version of the subdivision map. Before sealing the packets, he added the certified 3rd page of the easement on top. The clause Marissa had omitted did more than weaken her claim to the road. It showed that when she asked a deputy to arrest me, I had been standing on land the recorded agreement expressly said I still owned. The legal turning point did not depend on my former title, Marissa's temper, or the number of residents who believed the HOA's version of events. It depended on the difference between owning land and holding a limited right to use it. The recorded easement gave the subdivision no ownership interest in the ranch road. It did not transfer the soil, the fence line, the gate, or any portion of the surrounding pasture to the HOA. Title remained with my ranch, exactly as the certified deed and county plat described it. The association held only a narrow privilege. Emergency vehicles could cross the old route when necessary. Utility inspectors could enter for limited service work. Residents could use it temporarily if the subdivision's main entrance became unusable during an evacuation. Those rights did not allow the HOA to widen the road, remove fencing, distribute gate keys, send contractors onto the property, or convert the route into a daily shortcut. The third page made each restriction explicit: no permanent construction, no relocation of boundary improvements, no general residential traffic, no claim of ownership arising from use, no expansion without the written consent of the landowner. Marissa had done nearly everything the document prohibited. Her contractor had widened the road with crushed gravel. The crew had cut my chain, entered the pasture, removed 6 fence posts, and rebuilt the line approximately 12 feet inside my property. The HOA had invited residents to use the route and demanded permanent access to my gate. None of those acts were protected by the easement. The supplemental agreement offered no rescue. It had allowed the developer's utility vehicles to pass through for 6 months during construction. That authority had expired 7 years earlier. Its final paragraph stated that the temporary permission created no continuing rights for the developer, future homeowners, or the association. The HOA had built its entire claim on a right that no longer existed. The survey made the physical violation equally clear. Daniel's measurements traced the recorded boundary through 3 surviving monuments and the cap uncovered beneath the contractor's gravel. The results differed by only fractions of an inch from the survey completed when I purchased the ranch. The new fence was not sitting near an uncertain line. It stood nearly 12 feet beyond a verified boundary. That distinction mattered. A reasonable dispute could arise when old descriptions conflicted or monuments disappeared. Here, the deed, plat, survey, GPS measurements, and physical markers all agreed. Only the HOA's promotional map placed the road under association control. A sales map could show buyers where a developer hoped an exit might exist. It could not convey land. The permit issue created a separate problem. County records showed that no application had been submitted for the road expansion, grading work, or fence relocation. The number printed on Marissa's enforcement notice belonged to an unrelated drainage agreement. The contractor's authorization claimed the HOA had already verified ownership. The meeting minutes proved it had not. The property manager's email proved Marissa had been warned. The missing third page proved the board's copy concealed the very limits that defeated its claim. Together, those facts changed the nature of the case. The HOA could no longer describe the incident as a good-faith misunderstanding about an emergency road. Its board had received a title warning, skipped verification, entered private property, altered a boundary, and then accused the owner of trespassing. My years on the bench had taught me not to mistake a strong case for a finished one. Evidence still had to be authenticated. Agencies still had to inspect the site. The HOA deserved an opportunity to provide any document we had not found. I did not call former colleagues. I did not ask for special treatment. My name appeared on the complaints as the property owner, not as a retired judge. My attorney submitted the same records any landowner should have been able to submit: the certified deed, both surveys, the complete easement, the expired supplemental agreement, permit search results, camera files, photographs, repair estimates, meeting minutes, and the property manager's warning email. The packet sent to the sheriff's office focused on the trespass allegation. It showed that every location where Marissa claimed I had unlawfully stood fell inside the ranch boundary. The packet sent to code enforcement focused on the construction. It identified the disturbed area, the missing permit, the relocated fence, and the gravel placed beyond the easement corridor. The insurance notice focused on preservation. It instructed the carrier and HOA to retain emails, text messages, board records, maps, contractor instructions, and unedited copies of every document Marissa had given the deputy. By the following afternoon, the county had opened a code enforcement file. The sheriff's office assigned a supervisor to review the original incident report. Daniel was asked to mark the verified property line for an official site inspection. Marissa had expected her complaint to remove me from the ranch. Instead, It had created the record that brought 3 separate reviews directly to the HOA's new fence. The official inspection began 2 mornings later. A county code officer arrived first, followed by Daniel and 2 members of his survey crew. A sheriff's supervisor came separately with the original incident report and copies of the photographs Marissa had submitted. The contractor's representative appeared on behalf of his insurance company. Marissa reached the gate last. She wore a fitted red coat and carried the same folder she had used during the first confrontation. Her anger returned the moment she saw Daniel's temporary stakes crossing the gravel lane. She pointed toward the relocated fence and insisted that the line had been approved by the developer years earlier. The county officer did not accept the subdivision map as proof. He asked for a recorded plat, a permit, or a deed showing that the HOA owned the strip. Marissa provided none of them. Daniel began at the Northern Control Monument and walked the officials through each measurement. His equipment placed the legal boundary through the metal survey cap beneath the gravel. The same line matched the older Southern Monument, the county plat, and the description recorded in my deed. The inspector measured from that boundary to the new fence. At its widest point, the HOA's fence stood 12 feet 3 inches inside my ranch. The contractor's representative reviewed the work order and confirmed that his company had relied on the HOA's written statement that ownership had already been verified. Marissa immediately attempted to shift responsibility to the developer and claimed the board had believed the road was included when control of the subdivision was transferred. The sheriff's supervisor opened the complete easement. He examined the ownership clause, the restrictions on permanent construction, and the prohibition against general residential traffic. Then he compared those provisions with Marissa's trespass complaint. The locations identified in her photographs were all on my side of the verified boundary. The supervisor amended the incident record. He noted that there was no evidence I had entered HOA property and no factual basis for arresting me for trespass. He also requested copies of the camera footage showing the contractor cutting the chain and moving the fence. The county officer then inspected the grading work. He measured the widened lane, photographed the removed posts, and confirmed that no valid permit had been issued for the construction. The number on the HOA notice was unrelated to the property. He attached a stop work order to the temporary barrier. Marissa's voice rose, but the officials continued documenting the site. Her folder no longer controlled the conversation. Every claim she made was being checked against a recorded document, a physical monument, or a dated video. Before leaving, the inspector issued written instructions prohibiting the HOA and its contractors from entering the disturbed area, except for an approved restoration plan. The gravel could not remain. The relocated fence could not remain. No resident could use the route as a neighborhood exit. The sheriff's supervisor also warned the board that the easement could not be used as permission for ordinary traffic. The inspection had settled the boundary, the permit issue, and the false trespass allegation. It had not yet settled the cost. That calculation would include restoration, fencing, surveying, legal review, damaged grazing land, and the HOA's attempt to defend work performed after Marissa had already received a warning about the title problem. By the end of the afternoon, the red stop work notice covered the center of her new emergency route sign. The road she had tried to claim was closed, and the invoices had only begun to arrive. The stop work order became permanent until the HOA submitted a county-approved restoration plan. Over the next 3 months, the association's contractor removed the crushed gravel, repaired the damaged soil, and rebuilt the fence along Daniel's verified survey line. The 6 displaced posts were replaced, the secondary gate received a new chain and lock, and the disturbed pasture was reseeded under the supervision of the county inspector. The HOA also withdrew every violation and canceled the daily penalties it had attempted to place against the ranch. A corrected notice was sent to the residents explaining that the disputed road remained privately owned and could be used only under the narrow emergency conditions stated in the recorded easement. The financial consequences were harder for the board to hide. My documented claim included the new survey, fence reconstruction, gate repairs, soil restoration, lost grazing use, legal review, and preservation of the electronic evidence. After mediation, the HOA and its insurer agreed to reimburse $38,460. The county separately imposed $6,800 in grading and permit penalties. The contractor's insurer covered part of the physical restoration, but the association remained responsible for the decisions its board had authorized. Marissa tried to blame the developer, the contractor, and the property manager. The meeting minutes and warning email prevented that explanation from surviving scrutiny. She had been advised to verify the title before construction and had chosen to proceed anyway. At the next annual meeting, residents removed her as president by a wide vote. 2 other board members resigned, and the new board adopted a rule requiring a title report and legal review before any future work near an outside property boundary. The sheriff's office amended the original report to state that the trespass allegation was unsupported. The record confirmed that I had remained on my own land throughout the confrontation, and that there had never been a lawful basis to place me in handcuffs. I never used my former position to threaten Marissa or pressure the officials involved. Being a retired judge helped me recognize the weakness in her claim, but it did not decide the outcome. The deed decided ownership. The survey established the line. The camera showed what happened. The complete easement exposed what the HOA had no right to do. Marissa had arrived at my gate expecting authority, anger, and a red folder to outweigh the record. They did not. A property boundary does not move because someone speaks loudly enough. It moves only when the lawful documents say it does, and hers never did. If you believe homeowners should preserve every notice, photograph every change, and verify every claimed right before surrendering their property, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary landowners who stayed calm, kept the evidence, and made the truth impossible to ignore.